There is a moment, often identical to hundreds of other moments, when the body moves before the mind does. The familiar script plays again, the word that comes out too fast, the choice that looks like order, but plants chaos, the agreement that was never meant to be made, the extra hour granted to what consumes. It looks like a mistake, and it is. But even before that, it is an attempt at a solution. It calms an anxiety, avoids a clash, delivers a quick dose of recognition, offers relief from the feeling that life never quite fits. It works on something, which is why it returns. The loop does not come from nowhere. It comes from a real need met with the wrong tool, and when a shortcut works even for a few minutes, the body logs it as a viable route. From that point on, a minimal signal is enough for the track to reopen. Under the repeated gesture, there is almost always a need that was never given a clear place: safety, belonging, control, a pause that breaks the pressure, a rhythm that restores some margin. As long as it stays implicit, it rules in secret. It is not negotiated because admitting it would feel like surrender. It is not structured because naming it would force limits, timing, clauses. So it operates behind the scenes. It pushes from the shadows, guiding choices that, on the surface, look accidental. When a need finds no path, it settles for whatever is available. Repetition is born from this silent pact, a pact between what is missing and what covers it. Around it, the narrative built around the self reinforces inertia. This is just how I am. This is how I react. I've always been the one who works too much, gives in too much, talks too much, delays too much. Identity becomes a refined cage. It protects from the risk of contradicting oneself. It guarantees a surface coherence, and above all, it offers a ready story to explain every relapse. Personal history selects actions that stay consistent with the self. Behavior aligns so the plot is not betrayed. It isn't the mistake defending itself, it's the image. As long as the sentence, "This is what I am," remains intact, every deviation feels like betrayal, every interruption like a useless revolt against a destiny already signed. So the loop, instead of looking like a choice, starts to look like just how things are. The field a person lives in completes the design. Places, hours, people, tools, rituals, objects. Everything can become a trigger. Certain corridors of the day are built to make the same mistake, the same way. An hour when tiredness is high and decisions are still made. A table that invites staying when it is time to close. A conversation that always starts the same way and ends in the same wall. If the context isn't designed, it decides. And willpower, as noble as it is, lasts only a few minutes when the environment pulls the other way. It seems like a lack of character. Often, what's missing is something to hold on to. Small changes in the field can produce massive shifts. A door that closes 5 minutes earlier, an object moved out of reach, a calendar that doesn't leave sterile windows where mistakes are born from boredom, one more person at the table when words start to heat up, one less word where temptation has a voice. Even before psychology, the body often decides the trajectory: fatigue, broken sleep, nervous hunger, tension accumulated as residue from days lived at constant intensity. When the body is in deficit, it chooses shortcuts. The system looks for stability at low cost, and shortcuts, by definition, don't care about the long term. Many mistakes are physiological before they are moral. They come from the plain absence of recovery. A body that doesn't rest is like a city with the traffic lights out. The inner traffic looks for right-of-way and can't find it, so pressure rises. The loop repeats because the long road, stopping, breathing, eating, sleeping, moving, feels too expensive in the short term. The real price arrives later, but doing the math on later is a science learned late. Another trap is ambiguity. Doing better is not a criterion. Handling it differently is not a strategy. Trying harder is not a plan. Thresholds are needed. Timing, quantities, stop signals. Without parameters, the day beats intention. The unexpected writes the agenda. Mood decides instead of principle. Fatigue convinces that just this once won't hurt. Loops thrive in the generic. They want broad words where they can stretch out and hide. Precision instead narrows the field. It defines when, how much, how, with whom, up to where. A vague promise invites the old gesture back. A simple, measurable rule removes the room for negotiation with the self. This isn't romance, it's engineering. What has no boundaries expands. What has boundaries takes shape. Every repeated behavior comes with a reward, even if it's uncomfortable. It avoids exposure, protects from responsibility, allows staying in a known territory even if it is sterile. The hidden payoff is the secret gratification that makes the mistake resistant to arguments. As long as the payoff remains, the mind will always prefer habit to change. Seeing it means stripping the gesture of its aura of destiny and returning to it its true nature. It is an informed choice. This isn't about blame. It's about naming the trade with precision. Something is gained by letting something else happen. Clarity doesn't erase the need. It brings it into the light. Without that light, the loop is more convenient than the truth. Then there are the micro skills that are missing. Awareness isn't enough. Often, the basic ability that would make an alternative workable is not there. Saying no at the right time, planning one thing at a time, asking for help before the dam breaks, closing a task without reopening it 20 times, tolerating a brief discomfort without looking for anesthesia. The loop is the quick fix for a missing skill. It substitutes, covers, pretends to solve. Working on the quick fix isn't enough. What was never learned has to be learned. A minimal skill installed in the right place changes entire landscapes. It reduces friction, cuts the moments of vulnerability, makes the old shortcut unnecessary. Here, transformation is not only inner, it is technical. Finally, repetition is defended by language. Polished excuses, sharp analyses that explain why today wasn't the day. Context as the culprit, the calendar as an alibi, destiny as an umbrella. The story that protects the mistake is more tenacious than the mistake itself. Words bend the space to act. They call inevitable what was convenient. They name chance what was a choice. They define character what is a habit. Changing language isn't a formal exercise. It shifts the perimeter of what is possible. When the story stops justifying, room is freed to intervene, and intervention, freed from rhetoric, takes the sober form of an adjustment. Leaving the loop doesn't look like the heroic scene of the last time. It looks like a designed interruption, a small experiment with an external constraint that supports the gesture when mood sabotages it, an ally who doesn't comfort but holds the line, an environment that makes the alternative easier and the old path harder, a diary of evidence that moves perception from stories to data. What happens when it's done one way? What happens when the other is chosen? Not a huge effort, but good everyday engineering. The behavior you want becomes lower in probability and cost, while the loop of repeating the same mistakes becomes less accessible. This way, willpower is no longer required in high doses. A medium push is enough to change direction. The repetition of mistakes also has a temporal geometry. It shows up at the same hours, after the same accumulations, in the same inner seasons. Recognizing the cadence makes it possible to prepare the field when risk rises. This isn't prophecy, it's your own data. Mistakes don't like prediction, they thrive on improvisation. A minimal routine that protects vulnerable hours is worth more than 1,000 promises. A ritual that marks the end of a passage prevents residue from being dragged into the next stretch. An honest check of thresholds prevents slipping from a little to too much without noticing. The loop lives on drift. Attention to transitions makes the drift visible. What often surprises is how modest the first real improvement is. It doesn't arrive as a turning point. It arrives as a lower frequency, a shorter duration, a softer intensity. A mind that loves stories doesn't celebrate it because there is no drama to report. But the nervous system registers it. One more day without falling, a conversation stopped before it wounds, an evening that ends on time without losing dignity. These are signals that don't lie. They say the engineering is working, that the need has been met in a more adult way, that the image has lost a piece of its hypnotic power, that the context has stopped deciding alone, that a skill has been installed, that language has stopped defending. The mistake remains possible, but it is no longer inevitable. In this phase, the temptation to judge the past is strong. The desire appears to condemn every time a bad choice was made. It is another trap. Harsh judgment rebuilds the ground for anesthesia. It asks for punishment, feeds shame, reignites the same need that demanded a patch. Recognition, instead, closes a circle without turning it into a noose. It was done that way because it was the only way found to stay standing. This isn't indulgence, it's accounting. It shifts resources into today. Less energy spent denying the story, more energy available to change the conditions. Sometimes the loop persists because what is truly worth protecting has not been defined yet. No decision has been made about what deserves real protection. As long as everything seems important, the mistake has 1,000 noble excuses to return. When a few lines become non-negotiable, the space for exceptions shrinks. Protecting sleep the way a precious asset would be protected, defending an hour of deep work the way a relationship would be defended, guarding the integrity of a word the way a sacred threshold would be guarded. These are not formulas. They are embodied priorities. The loop, used to ruling gray zones, struggles in the presence of clear boundaries. There is a kind of repetition that resists every strategy until it is recognized for what it is, unprocessed pain asking to be heard and finding only architecture. In these cases, technique prepares the ground, but it isn't enough. What's needed is the courage to stay where nothing gets resolved quickly. Above all, what's needed is permission not to make truth fit business hours. Some wounds ask for time, sober witnesses, the right words spoken slowly. Here the loop was a way of surviving. As long as pain stays mute, any behavioral engineering will be partial maintenance. No grand philosophy is needed. What's needed is not running from the one room where the noise quiets down because things are called by their real names. When discontinuity starts to work, there is no need to turn it into a banner. Loops love the scene, the shouted promise, the oath, the declaration at impossible hours. The real exit prefers restraint. It doesn't ask for witnesses, it asks for proof. It doesn't ask for applause, it asks for repetition. The proof is simple: fewer relapses, more stability, less surprise, more predictability, fewer last-minute swerves, more margin. Those watching from the outside will notice late, because what truly changes doesn't change in bursts. It changes like trees do, quietly, until one day it's obvious, and no one remembers when it happened. In the end, there is an outcome that makes no noise, but can be recognized with clarity. The initial need, the one never given a clear place, stops governing, not because it disappears, but because it finds a better form. Safety replaces control, pause replaces escape, order replaces anesthesia. The repeated gesture loses its seduction because the organism has access to roots that cost less. That is when the mistake changes name. It is no longer the usual one, it becomes possible. And what is possible, unlike what is inevitable, does not command. There is no epic here. There is a sum of small movements, a need finally spoken, a story about the self that loses its arrogance, sleep protected, a short rule that cuts ambiguity, a hidden payoff, a skill learned, language cleaned up, an experiment built to work. They are few things, but together they are everything, because it is in that little that the trajectory of the always same gesture gets interrupted, and where the trajectory breaks, the possibility of choosing appears. Not every choice will be good, but it won't be the old mistake deciding for the one who's living. This is not an indictment, it is not an accusation, but it can be a mirror, and a mirror does not judge, it reflects. In Indigo, recognizing yourself is this: a place with no face, no blame, no demand. Those who recognize themselves do. Those who stop, stop. Whoever goes through it alone. But from that moment on, something has already taken shape, and it will never be the same.